Now loading.
Yeah,
Yes, now.
yes, sir.
Shall I start?
Yes, please begin.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity today. So my paper today, as the term states, I'm trying to talk about water scarcity that has been created by groundwater depletion, specifically in the Indus Basin. As you know, it kind of supports the breadbaskets of both the countries of India and Pakistan. Currently, it is facing a very serious issue of groundwater depletion. And right now, I'm trying to point out to the similarities of the issues that are being faced by both sides in specific to Punjab, because we have Western Punjab and Eastern Punjab, and they have similar issues that are going on. And I want to kind of suggest a chance for collaboration between the two countries for this reason. Yeah, so as you see in the maps that is given, the Indus Rivers arises from the Himalayan range, and it travels through Jammu and Kashmir and a couple of other states in India, and then it flows into Pakistan. And if you see the right side map is the transboundary aquifer. Basically, aquifer is a huge groundwater, consider like a river that is there under the ground as well. And it is more like fuel, because till now we have that perception that till a decade back, groundwater is something that can just be used like that, but it's not like that. It's more like fuel. So once you remove groundwater, it doesn't exist anymore. So here we have a huge basin, one of the largest aquifers that in the world that is being shared between both the countries over here. Yeah, so the main treaty that has been signed between both the countries is the Indus Water Treaty, which was signed in 1960. It is till now being considered one of the most successful water sharing treaties between two countries, because somehow India and Pakistan have always been under some stress. But then in particularities to this treaty, we have had a few good instances as well. So according to this treaty, it's very simple. You have 6 rivers that are being diverted from the Indus River. So you have got Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, which have been dedicated to India. The Jhelum, Chenab, and Indus is being given to Pakistan. So this treaty gives full rights for these particular rivers to those countries for consumptive use, for agriculture or for industry. And on top of that, they also talk about hydropower allocation. Like, see, some of the western rivers that Jhelum, Chenab, and Indus that flows into Pakistan, India has given proposals or is in the process of constructing few hydroelectric dams as well. In the same cases, some of them have been taken up as contentions by Pakistan as well. They have gone to the International Court of Justice regarding some of the plans that India had put forward. But then we have a good, successful redressal mechanism, because at that stage, somehow there was a win-win situation that came to be. So one of the good things about this treaty is that for so many years, they have had clear lines of legislation written, and there is a process with which, if there's an issue, we can sort it out. But when we come to the limitations, major issue, there is no mention of groundwater. So all that they've done is only the surface water they've mentioned. And then again, coming to the second point, climate change is a big issue right now, because we have erratic events that are happening on both sides, and it is affecting. Right now, we are feeling how much it's affecting us exactly. So that period in 1960, we cannot really blame them, but then climate change was not considered. And now there is overpopulation, and the demand for food has increased a lot, and there is some sense of dissatisfaction on both sides of what the Indus Water Treaty spoke about it back then. So there's really a hard need to reevaluate into the treaty right now. So the Indus Basin Aquifer, I need to, back in 2013, I did my master's thesis on the same topic actually. Back then, there was not a single mention of the groundwater issues in Punjab or whatever is happening. But in 2015, there was a report which studied about 37 large aquifers around the world, and they came up with the statement that it's the second most stressed aquifer in the world, and they're expecting in another 20-30 years, by 2050, desertification to start if things continue as it is right now. So only after 2015 can we see that actual research or people both on policy initiatives or proper data mining and others have started happening. That itself is very late. And as I've mentioned here, both Punjab, Sindh, and here on the Indian side, Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, and all are the good. Basically, they are the major food producers, rice and wheat, most water-intensive producers, states of both the countries. And as I've mentioned, both on Pakistan side and India side, rather than using the surface water, we have been heavily dependent on groundwater for our irrigation facilities. And this was mainly because we didn't realize at one point that this will go down and we'll not be able to bring it to the point where the groundwater can be recharged again. And in India, 79% of the irrigation is happening mainly through tube wells. So in Punjab, Pakistan, to give just a comparison, most of the 80% of the wheat and maize for the entire country is coming from here. The groundwater is receding heavily from about, almost 250 centimeters per year. It's going down. And similar to India, even in Punjab and Pakistan, the government has provided, electricity subsidy so that people can put in tube wells and take the groundwater. And the most important point is that both in India and Pakistan, if you own the ground, you own the groundwater as well. Nobody is there to exactly question as to how much you're withdrawing, where you're giving it. None of this is monitored or none of this is questioned as well. And one of the important facts for us here is that the flow of both the river water and the groundwater is from India to Pakistan. So if over-exploitation happens in India, it affects the Pakistani water forces. But then over-exploitation on that side doesn't really affect the kind of water presence that we have here. So it is more the whatever treaty or whatever that I'll be mentioning further should be as an initiative from the Indian side, because it is more of considering the well-being. And the another important issue is the water salinity and arsenic pollution that has come into the groundwater here. As more and more we've been going into the groundwaters, that saltwater intrusion is happening. At the same time, arsenic pollution is happening. And on the Indian side, in the picture, if you can see, it's basically how the groundwater is present below the Pakistan area. So what you have is the first layer is the unconfined aquifer over there. So basically, this is the set of water that can be recharged using surface water or rainfall. In the initial stages itself, we emptied it completely. And then you have another confined aquifer, which is taking it out completely is going to be bad for us, but then that is over as well. We are right now at the dredges of the last layer. Right now we are currently drawing tube wells almost up to 200 feet under the ground to draw up that water, and we are using that to cultivate rice and wheat, which are the most water intensive crops. I don't know how far we have heard of the concept of virtual trade. Is basically where we are growing highly water intensive crops and then we are exporting it abroad. But then we really we are basically selling our groundwater to them at a free of cost, because groundwater extraction is being allowed freely by the government through energy subsidies and others. So that is a major issue that needs to be noted over here. Now, if you come to both these states, there is also this issue of where now Punjab has lost 80% of its groundwater is gone. So now the farmers have started complaining about all the surface water that comes to Punjab. Some of it is being diverted to the other states as well through canal systems, so that the irrigation there can be, the irrigation can be done over there. And now they're saying that we have lost our groundwater and you're sending all the surface water to the other states. We are the main producers over here, and how come we are not getting any of the surface water? So now they've started slowly, interstate conflicts are starting to come up, where Punjab is blaming Haryana, saying that you're sending too much of water on that side. And same Haryana is also coming up with similar, questions towards Punjab, saying, no, this is the amount of water that we need, and suddenly there can't be any directions. But the main reason, if you notice, was the green revolution that came up, during which initially Punjab didn't produce only rice and wheat. We were also producing sugarcane, cotton, maize, and everything. But during the green revolution, they brought in only these highly rich crops, because it was mainly required for the PDA system. So most of the crops that are being grown in Punjab in that area is being directly sold to the government, to the PDA system. and they have the minimum state price. So it is quite a advantageous crop to grow over there. And another important thing, yeah, now that I've already mentioned that 80% of the groundwater is lost in there, we still are planting rice and wheat only. We still have not really diverted from there and gone to other types of agricultural crops, to consider. Now, what is being done on both sides is, again, I have to state that it's a very late action, delayed action. Only in 2015, after they said that it's the most stressed, 2017, 18, even now, when I did my literature review, you can, most of the papers were on the side from the Pakistani Punjab, where they're talking about what all data can be taken from there, what are the issues they're facing, and how much water is there lost and all. But on the Indian side, the amount of research that has been done on this topic is pretty less. And as I've mentioned here, only in August 2020 was a serious panel was set up under Montek Singh Ahluwalia, asking for recommendations as to what can be done to make the situation better. And naturally, they're suggesting we need to change the crops. We can't always keep planting rice over here. So we need to come up with other cash-rich crops that can be made and will be advantageous for the farmers as well, so that they can take it up. Now you have other Kisan, KV, the farmer helping institutions around there, which are locally doing a lot of work. They're trying to bring in micro irrigation to the state where, and they're also providing a lot of techniques by which even rice, but can be cultivated using less amount of water. And then you have some of the farmers who are trying to diversify by doing other plantations like potatoes or others, but they're very dissatisfied because at the end of the day, they're not getting as much gains as the other states. So far what they got, they did not get it, because the kind of importance that has been given to rice and wheat by their state government is not the same for the other vegetables or any other crops as well. And again, just to bring into focus, as long as the groundwater is privately owned, it is very hard both for data collection or very hard to bring in change as well. And just to bring in a comparison mode, the same thing is happening on the Punjab side as well, where Punjab is kind of blaming Sindh province, saying that more of the water that is coming to Punjab is being used by Sindh instead. And there's a small chance of interprovincial conflict arising on that side as well. So on a whole, if we notice that the kind of problems that we are facing on the Indian Punjab and the Western Punjab side is pretty much the same. Either it's a water-based conflict happening between two of the states, and then we have pollution coming up. And then there's a deep lack of groundwater, and there's a definite need for groundwater recharge that needs to happen. And in 2018, Pakistan also passed a water policy where they have very similar objectives as to what we have taken as well. So how is climate change and the current COVID and the farm bill that is being discussed for the past 3-4 days affecting this particular thing is that climate change will mainly come in two ways. One is the erratic seasons that is getting more and more. In fact, the western side of Punjab has been declared as one of the most vulnerable climate cities in the world in the recent times. And number two is the Himalayan glacial melt. So all the surface water that is coming is mostly from the glacial melt that happens during specific seasons. Now, what they're expecting is as the temperatures increase more and more, and the glacial melt is a little more, in the subsequent years, there will be an excess of water that will come in. But following that, around about 2050, around that time, we'll actually be heading towards desertification, because the water will completely fall, and we don't have groundwater recharged well enough to support the needs of the people. But at the same time, we have population expansion is happening, and the demand for food is increasing. So it's like polar opposites. And then, yeah, so because of COVID, what is the implication that we'll see is that only in recent times have we started seriously talking about how to make the situation better. But then my fear is that COVID will again set us back a little because of the amount of economic distress that is happening right now. the focus will not be into environmental conservation or water conservation. Those strategies will be again pushed a couple of years in front, but till now it will again be revival of economy, and more people, because of lack of jobs and everything, they have come back to their places in Punjab and everything. So more people are again getting engaged in their traditional types of agriculture as well. And that is kind of painful because we have come this far, and again we'll be setting the stage back a couple of years to come there. And the proposed farm bill, it's a kind of let's say a problematic situation right now, because the complete bill is not being properly understood. I think there still needs to be clarity on it. But the farm bill kind of talks about the MSP. They're not taking it off completely, but they're offering freedom of agriculture for the farmers completely. But for a place like Punjab, where they're completely dependent on rice and wheat, they feel that if this kind of open trading comes into place, the current system will go down and it will affect their productivity and the earning scenario. And a little worrying part is that it will somehow discourage the farmers from again moving to other types of crops instead of rice and wheat, because rice and wheat will somehow remain standard all the time. Now, why should we collaborate over here? Why? See, for so long we have been going on fine and everything, and the Indus Water Treaty is there. But even though it is outdated, what are our opportunities for here is that, one, basically we can use this as an opportunity for conserving and easing of tensions between both the countries. I would like to know that this Indus Water Treaty is Indus Water sharing is one of the main reasons that the conflict in Kashmir has also been happening. Even though they consider it as a territorial conflict, one of the main reasons is that they always fear that somehow India might stop the flow of the Indus waters into Pakistan. So that is why they're trying to take control of the position where the rivers, change course. And second is a point of collaboration that I can see over here, and many people have also focused on it, is that if both the states, like both sides of Pakistan, Punjab on either sides, and a few other places who are producing wheat and rice, if they can work on changing the crops together, and some of the reports suggest that you can have better reach towards the Central Asian market, and with mutual benefit, we'll be able to export our goods at better options, and it will be good for the farmers as well. And yeah, as I said again, what is the activities of India will affect Pakistan, but then Pakistan's activities not really going to affect India. But then I think here it should be a proactive goodwill option on the side of India to take this step, because at a later stage it might help us both in conservation and also at being being that as a concept of being big brother in the neighborhood, it is going to help that as well. So now the final question that we have is, should we just include all this groundwater concept under the Indus Water Treaty itself, or should we create a separate bilateral treaty for managing this issue? Here the thing is that Indus Water Treaty has been there for so long, and there have been so many contentions about it. Now if we decide to revise the IWT, it is going to be a long process. It took them almost 10 years to come up with the treaty in the first place. So now if they want to do it all over again, I think it's going to take too long a time. And by then our groundwater situation is going to become even more worse. So the best thing right now would be to sign a separate bilateral treaty with Pakistan to make, for this particular Indus Basin alone.
Sujita, time is already.
Yes, sir. This is the last. That's it. So the most important thing we need to do is data procurement. Because absolutely there is no enough data as to how much groundwater is there, how much is being taken away, how much has to be recharged. We have a lack of data that is coming, and we need to collaborate to at least get this basic data. That is the first important thing. Next is sharing of knowledge and technologies between the both countries, and see how far it can be implemented. And to calculate the groundwater economics, because groundwater is not being given value at all. So once we start collaborating, we can have a common source as to how much it will cost, how much they can afford to export such, and what other crops can be done over here. And basically better monitoring of the situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the presentation.